Namaste, Jai Bharat. This is an expression in Sanskrit basing on the Veda Upanishad acknowledged tradition is that Sa Vidya Yabhimaktai, which simply education liberates or knowledge liberates. Of course, there's a difference between education and knowledge. That's there. I'm not going into that, but there's a definite difference. Education might give you information. If information has to get transferred into knowledge, then the information must have the property of affecting the knower or affectivity. Then, of course, it turns into knowledge. That's a different issue. But knowledge liberates. We also have many paths to liberation, and one of the most important also path to liberate is knowledge, jnana, marga, what we say. But here I am going to talk about something different, but based on it, knowledge liberates. Knowledge redeems you from slavery, compulsion, and coercion, and all kinds of things. We have two instances in front of us. One is Marxism, so-called communism, and the second is radical Islam. I speak about both of these things together because these both have an element of oppression, or rather a serious element of oppression in their system to enslave people through thinking, thoughts process. And how education comes, which is primarily important, which I forgot to mention, how knowledge comes to you. See, Savidya Vimukti says knowledge liberates, where knowledge should come to you through education. But the present time is a digital world. Knowledge comes after you. It comes to your mobile. So the digital time, the digital world has really threatened these two, radical Islam and communist, Marxist communism, etc. Whatever they had been propagating, whatever they had been preaching, whatever they had been teaching people to put them under kind of compulsion and coercion, just vanishes for nothing. Just vanishes through this digital information time, through digital information. Now, interestingly, it's Marx who wrote that book, German Ideology, where Marx would talk about ideology as an instrument to deceive, an instrument of deception. Ideology, of course, that it gets later developed into various kinds. And when it comes to Lenin, and Lenin says ideology, which is revolutionary ideology, doesn't deceive. That takes you to progress. That is the addition of Lenin. But for Marx, in that book, German Ideology, he talks a big book. He talks at length. And later, of course, when you come to the neo-Marxist, Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, basically Italian, he coins an expression, he coins a word called hegemony. And hegemony, of course, he defines as it is intellectual legitimization of social domination. That's intellectual legitimization of social domination. That is, through sets of ideas, through sets of thoughts which are synthetically created and spread and propagated, you legitimize the social domination intellectually, that this is not real domination, etc., etc. So that's what he speaks. He talks in the context of bourgeoisie, but then this is precisely what communism started doing it after, especially neo-communism, when they started existing in political form. Similarly, is the case with radical Islam. You go to radical Islam slightly later. From being progressive, which communists claim, from being progressive, from being rational, communists claim, but then all the time deceiving people into believing what they are right. There's a kind of caucus which maintains domination so that the people will believe them and obey them. There's a kind of complete obedience in communism. You just see, it's a complete obedience, total domination by the so-called. Ideally, it is supposed to be dictatorship of proletariats, but it doesn't happen. It becomes dictatorship of the party people. Party people, influence people, etc., influential people, etc. We have seen it wherever communism got into practice in the past. We have seen this through plenty of examples. Now, what happens is that the present time those kinds of ideal communists cease to exist, and what we have today is communist bourgeoisie who is employing the instruments of opposition which the bourgeoisie is accused of using by communists. So that's the situation of communism. So with the digital world, digital information coming to you, then these things gets exposed, and then in time, communism of course has vanished from most parts of the world. Most part of the earth, it will vanish. Its last traces also will vanish, and then it will remain as a matter of joke for people. Similar shall happen to radical Islam. Now, radical Islam uh, doesn't is unknown to people. They understand things through narratives, which of course are hegemonic. Narratives created by the autochthones, custodians. Actually, autochthon is too decent a word to call these custodians. The custodians who presents things as they want, which may have nothing to do with their religious text or religion, but their interpretation, their version of things. And this version is very dangerous because look at Pakistan. They have a version of Islam which only they have. So as per that, all others are unfaithful, non-faithful, kafirs. Of course, you look at the king of Jordan, who is supposed to be descendant of Prophet Muhammad himself, is explicit in Malaysia. Also, many such nations are now telling the concept of kafir is an anachronism. It's a contradiction in terms. It's a non sequitur. Do not use that. There is nobody like kafir. They started telling that it will go on, and modernization of Islam per se, many have taken initiative into, and it's getting on because they can't help it. In digital age, the real knowledge comes to you. Many of those who are very ardent followers must have never read the texts because it's in a language which might not be available to them. But then they can these days get these texts in the language which is familiar to them. So this is quite possible. They understand things directly without a mediator interpreting it to his convenience and putting it in front of you. So then you have this Salafism, Wahhabism, etc. These, of course, are really one understands what they are really in front of the text which they are supposed to follow, and even some others, especially like Saudi, if I am not wrong, would say hadiths are not to be taken very seriously because hadiths happened some 200 years plus after the original Islam's coming. So these are all later additions. The later additions are to be taken with a pinch of salt. Instead of improvising, later additions were more suppressive. So look at the situation of a woman as projected through by the custodians of religion. It's pathetic in Islam. And how long you think women will accept that and live? Not likely for a long time. So it's a digital world, a digital age. Information comes to you, then it's against Vidya Yamamuktaye. Knowledge liberates. So these two things, communism, Marxism, and radical Islam, either if they don't go for drastic changes, then they will cease to exist in time. Maybe not tomorrow, but definitely day after tomorrow. That's how nations like Saudis, they change. They modernize themselves. They have issued driving license to women, that black coat is not compulsory, confining the parda is not compulsory. All those things they're slowly evolving, changing. See, evolution, of course, is a process that happens towards progress through change. But many changes are to be needed. So this is what should happen, shall be happening in future. It's a kind of foresaying prediction is too harsh and a confident word. I'm not doing that. But these things can happen tomorrow. Things will change. Marxism, of course, had withered away as Marx predicted. States wither away. But Marxism, communism, is withered away. The theory withered away because the theories were really basically fantasy of one great mind. Marx was a great mind, undoubtedly. It's a fantasy of a great mind. And then all this wonderful kind of existence of society with equality and all kinds of thought they projected. But then when it actually came into practice, it becomes an instrument to oppress. That's why later I think Lenin says state is an instrument of oppression in the hands of bourgeoisie to to that extent, precisely that happened to communism. State and authority had become an instrument of oppression at the hands of here instead of bourgeoisie at the hands of the communist party leaders. That's what happened to communism. Islam, of course, the religious authority who claim themselves custodianships religion are doing it for their sake. They can't do anything. Now, there's an interesting thing in Islam. You see, there's a concept of heaven, hell. Of course, Mars has nothing to do with that. There's a concept of heaven, hell, etc. And you see, we look at that. Whatever is rigidly and strictly forbidden on earth is permitted endlessly, posthumously in heaven. Whatever you are not allowed to do on earth is allowed in heaven. And anyone thinking you will understand the contradiction of this kind of things. So we see with some other thought again. Till then, it is Namaste. Jai Bharat, Jai Shri Ram.